Arabian Nights, Chapter 2. All frequencies are silent. Time took a parallel path and is finding its way back to press play on this reality. Yon floats in the dark, knowing not when and where he will wake, or if his remaining sand clock is flowing thinner. A dream in a dream that is not a dream, and yet he floats, and all else is hulled in darkness. Time seems not to matter here, because matter believes it does not matter. Everything that rushed with purpose finds itself halted, living or not, as the destination no longer registers in the seeker or object traveling, or does it only seem so as the path traveled and the path ahead are both kept unlit? Is a void a space when its limits are endlessly interwoven, where time is not permitted to follow through? Does time circle it, waiting to be invited in and make it present? A different time, a marbled space, dark to the observer. It is endlessly moving. It does not wait. It glides and caresses the new-found thing. A boy has entered into their conscious, a new life, a new breath, fresh to behold. Expired is death. It is day. They behave as all, and all is as one, flowing infinitely between the space of endless and time. A desert forsaken by some, an oasis delivered to others. This is all, and this is now, and this is when, and this is how. Yon hears this and wonders what that was all about, only catching some of the words while he was in slumberland. His eyes shock open, and he suddenly wakes. His body twitches confused, as if someone had thrown a heap of hot coal onto an iced pool and immediately freighted the unbecoming mass onto Yoon while he was asleep. Goosebumps flood his skin, while the shock is nowhere near of wearing thin. They flow back and forth, marveling at the one who entered, the one new with the shining, piercing the matter through. The presence of his light that breaks from between his lids project through them. They welcome the warmth, the frequency. What else do they detect? He displays an uncomfortable despair deep within. Streams of light pass from him, the source, and for once the others enjoy the ride in all its reflections. They always overwhelm the new. This time they surf the wave of this one forceful youth. Like a bush of life, they see his leaves are golden, and the stem rises from a solid base of silver light. A night yet to find its pieces fallen, to be one and whole, and join the starry night, showing the way out of every ill fusion. His light is a counter, a natural form of its purest, to freely move in the darkest of oceans, the darkest of hearts, a star, a shooting star marking its way past, a shining gun, a forceful, unwavering lance, a mighty bush laying its leaves in the path of trapped seekers, to make no longer of them meager and instead be driven into their own evolutionary steps, to go further, faster, and more eager. The words sounding from nowhere reverberate as his own words spoken in Yoon's mind. They find anchor in his roots, the remnants of which are fixed to him shall the future call on to no longer roost. Man, I can't see. Why is nothing around? I can't touch anything solid. It's so dark. Man, what is this? Come on, man. Yoon can't tell if his eyes are open or closed, if he is in the air or underwater. Nothing is making any obvious contact with his eyes, skin, or lungs. Yoon sobs and begins hyperventilating. His skin feels cold, but he is sweating. He struggles with his feet, trying to find something to latch onto, but the message traveling back through his nervous system returns. Nothing. Many things are happening at once, and don't make immediate sense to Yoon. Why am I floating? Or am I falling? Why is everything so quiet? He now feels himself in free fall, but there is no turbulence to suggest that it is air he's falling through. But he knows somehow that he is falling or is being pulled towards something. What's happening to me? Why are my eyes not opening? Why is everything so terribly dark? My feet, something heavy is in my feet. Why can't I move? Am I floating? I'm tired. He yawns and instinctively wants to raise his hand to cover his mouth, but nothing happens. He can't move it. Ow, my ears, is what he wants to say, but his lips won't move. Pressure builds up in him, an internal indicator that signals he is moving towards a much denser field. In this sense, it's not unlike diving into deeper water and continuing on into the depths. His chest begins to stress as his lungs progress to an over-exaggerated intake, pushing against his ribcage and barely filling them. His shallow breaths don't deliver the needed oxygen to his head, and his mind begins to fog. What am I breathing in? It doesn't quite feel like air somehow. He tries to scream, but Yun suddenly can neither breathe out to scream nor breathe in to inhale. Did I imagine I was breathing? He thinks, panic-stricken, as the pain of his reality builds up to an asthmatic terror. The pressure in his ears painfully continues, flowing down his jaw and lymph nodes positioned between his ear and neck. Some facts about recent events eventually come back to him, but he realizes he can't quite access all of his memories. When consulting his mind in making the effort to push and to access them, the feeling he gets in response is as if he got caught in a sticky mousetrap that he is vigorously attempting to pry off his shoe, exposing the long, numerous stringy strands attached to his soul. Didn't I jump through a door of light? Am I dead? Didn't I make it? Is this what happens after? Many thoughts enter his mind, each fighting their space. He reflects on some of the more recent actions he's not so proud of, but still. Mother clucker, nailed him good, he thinks, excited. Thought you could take me so easily, Dex? Idiotic bastard. Came knocking my head with your dirty feet? Getting all cocky? I bounced your pitch base, stretching under the floor, while Angie powered up to me. Sussinated your cheap dirty base. Sickle head, small time, chump pitch boy, el pendejo. Yun's words become shorter and unorganized when he is emotional, but he still chuckles at the memory nonetheless. In the meantime, he draws closer to whatever source is pulling him in the deep and dark. While his mind is preoccupied, his body enters a new space of force, and something else in the darkness grins in the most evil bearing of natures. A whirling wind strides about. In the dark void, its motions are relatively mute. A hum, if that's what it is. The forces it creates reveal a harsh, combing, centrifugal dance that send reverberating echoes through the void that can be more so felt instead. A certain coarse sound of the rushing and brushing of small objects, granular, innumerable, appear as the only other vibrations in this dark space. It mimics the sensation of the ever-changing heights and depths of an ever-moving sea, and is only betrayed by the distinctive lack of wetted splashing particular to the character of liquids. With these thoughts entering and wandering in the halls of Yun's mind, he grabs focus and opens his eyes and wakes. He moans slowly. His balance feels off. He senses solid ground on which his back lays on. Yun feels dry, not at all wet, and his vision is a blur. Some time passes while he works to gather his eyes' focus and brings himself to gradually electrify his mental start button and get on with the accessing of the most recent data. Yun feels as if he woke up too early and slept too long at the same time. The feeling of too early because his mind resists to catch fire despite his continuous attempts of lighting it up, and the feeling of too late because his back and neck hurt for having laid down too long. His fingers comb the ground beside him, and they translate back a solid stone texture and etched out squares. The surface feels particularly smooth to the touch and cold. Yun's eyes begin to clear up and he's able to make out more of his environment. His head tentatively jolts up, and what his eyes capture he has never seen in person or could have imagined himself to be in at this time or perhaps ever. It is night. He knows this for a fact as he looks above himself and sees the naked night sky appearing bluish dark. There are the stars and a bright full moon displaying an odd difference, something that locks his eyes on it completely and unmissably. The moon takes up a lion's share of the sky. The view of it commands such a presence. It appears to hover from the most distant horizon, and yet it remains within the Earth's atmospheric window. It feels like you could just go and touch it, as unrealistic as it seems. But what is realistic here? According to Yun's geeky understanding of physics, it would mean that a very catastrophic event would have befallen Earth. The two gravitational masses would be too close in proximity to not cause an effect between them. They would have to duke it out to the misery and world-encompassing misfortune to particularly affect those tiny creatures on it called humans, who with all the other carbon-based life forms who call this planet Earth home would have to face quite a precarious and superlative momentous extinction event worthy to be marked in the history books if any were left to exist. This geo-transforming event would cause a tragic emergency on planet Earth. Yun even sees the individual carvings in the deep craters on the moon as clearly as he can see the lines on his palm, if not better. He barely can spot the now visible glistening formations of ice on its surface, not usually witnessed with the naked eye. A silver bluish shimmer coats the ground and the surroundings for miles, and the light of the moon is so radiant it easily makes visible what the surface in the area is mostly made of: sand. Yun is in a desert of dunes. A cool breeze washes into his face. A few sand grains land on his open lips, which immediately begin on the task to suck the precious moisture off them. Yun reacts and spits them out with vigor. He stares blankly at a stone platform lit by seemingly old wooden torches that are each attached to large, tall and aged marble stone columns, on which ground he finds himself sitting on. Moments pass and nothing happens. Yun expects to wake up from this surreal dream, but the wind just keeps howling in the distance, where he observes some particularly tall dunes that are uneventfully being bathed in the moon's gloriously far-reaching light. It induces a feeling of a blend of a peaceful and soothing mood. Yun refreshingly basks in it, despite his serene surroundings that invites in him a very imperturbable feeling, a calm, neutral, and soothing aura. He is also very aware that he did not take a recent trip to the dunes in the continent of Africa on an expedition to find whoever yet to be discovered but rumored about, but now generally unknown, but back then all-known Alpha and Omega Egyptian god King Emperor, who supposedly had a very healthy and remarkable constitution to live on through hundreds of years of human strife and supervise dozens of major wars. No, Yun did not. Instead, he sits here on very real stone, observing very real smelling outdoors air, a very real tasting sand corn, observing with his own eyes a very real looking, highly unusual and mega-sized moon. And because of this realization, Another emotion quickly rushes in. Fear. Despite this serenity, his situation is forced and his mind has completely paused, empty of words, afraid that any move he makes could bring on something new, strange. He looks around and around again. Still, nothing happens. No one seems to be here. Seriously, man, how am I getting out of this weird dream? Come on, man, wake up. Some minutes pass, and he lets himself come off the emotional edge to calm down a few notches. Yun, for the first time since he woke up, takes a deep breath, inviting in a cool, clean-tasting flux of air, exchanging his used CO2-filled lungs with invigorating oxygen. It creates an enjoyably fresh touch against his throat as it enters, and with that, the energy to move arrives. He leans forward, carefully observing everything around him as he stands up. His muscles feel a little stiff, making more of a stronger suggestion that he did lie here still for a good while. How he hasn't caught a little sniffle baffles him. It is cool air that washed over my chest for who knows how long I've been lying here. I should have caught something like a cold and be coughing by now. He contemplates this thought as he simultaneously is trying to figure the place out. In time, his cold muscles learn to engage with his commands and wake up sufficiently for him to complete the motion and come to his feet. Standing at his full height gives him an even better perspective and angle of his far-stretching surroundings. The desert is incredibly vast, and he turns, making a slow 360. The imposing view flows beautifully and uninterrupted into the distant starlit expanse, where it seems to continue on and on. The dunes near the wide stretches of the horizon reflect the light of the moon in different gradients. Who knew a desert could do that? It's like tiny diamonds on sand, millions and billions of them. In this light, it's pure magic, thinks Yun, mesmerized. The wind pushes past his hairs, and for a moment, renewed, he gives in to the peace. The wind rushes past his ear so tenderly and precise it nearly feels hand-guided somehow. He looks down to find his hand as expected and inspects his clothes. Everything is still here. He looks around suddenly, become by angst. Only now does he notice that a good few stretches ahead of him stands a solid rectangular stone table hulled in shadows. Or was it not there before? But how? He narrows his eyes a little to better see it. The light from the torches don't seem to quite touch it. He notices some objects are just laying there on top of that table. Yun takes a few steps forwards and keeps going, carefully scanning the area ahead of him for movements. As he nears the table, his eyes move towards one torch. He examines the flames on the wooden stick. Specifically, they move consistently in an upwards wavy-like pattern. The flames don't seem to burn the cloth wrapped around the stick, as if the fire was preoccupied in consuming something else around it. Cool, is Yun's response. Totally should have that for Halloween. His eyes travel up the column, which appears higher now that he is closer. He would guess it to be around 8 to 10 meters, 26 to 33 feet. This place is out of this world. Kindred by feast. Suddenly more flames appear on the table, and it is brought fully to light. Yun's head turns towards it in reflex. More torches. I didn't see this before. Those ones are fire coming out of bowls. He notices wide-eyed. The table is made out of stone that seems to have been carefully shaped into a long, rectangular form. The tabletop itself seems to have been chiseled out of one incredibly large, red marble rock and has had its expensive-looking surface professionally polished. The tabletop's sides have had artisanal gold plating applied to them. The gold follows the sides around, unbroken, as if it has been molten onto it in one go. The legs of the table are made of a different stone, dark grey, likely to be granite, a very tough material, able to handle weight. The legs, despite the non-fancy looking stone, still are shaped in a form pleasing to the eye. Each leg looks like an hourglass. To Yun's discernment, it appears as if the stone tabletop sides were carved inwards to make space for the gold to level with it seamlessly. On the shiny plating are intricate carvings of foreign symbols and apparent languages Yun doesn't recognize. 3 bowls are evenly placed across the lavishly ornamented table, which is protected by a velvet cover that follows the width of the bowls and the length of the table, only partially covering it. On Yun's closer inspection, the inside of the bowls display an interesting construction of 2 rings. The inner ring sinks to a lower platform compared to the outer ring, but only from the inner do the flames rise and dance candidly. The outer ring is filled to the brim with glistening white pebbles on top of carefully measured brilliant white sand, which are seemingly designed to perform the task of a firebreaker. As he approaches the table, the air and ground to him feel warmer, but what catches Yun's eyes primarily is what the table is so lavishly adorned with. "Oh, there's food on there. It looks so rich. I'm hungry." Yun rushes towards the table, and his fingers fly over the distinguished platters of tasty spectacles that lay before him. Within the time it takes Yun to sit down, he already is well on his way on crushing on some rustic bread and cheese between his teeth. Next, he cuts down on his sweet rare elk steak graced with a reduced wine sauce, sided with roasted mini potatoes sat on a cool creme fraiche, sided with a tiny cup filled with a buttery-rich foie gras, both topped with parsley leaves dressed in a honey and reduced white wine sauce, and a second plain batch of foie gras topped with crushed white peppercorns, and a fingertip full of coarse pink Himalayan rock salt glued together with a swipe of extra virgin, extra cold olive oil that has been stored in a dark glass bottle and contains chili seeds, crushed cloves of garlic and saffron, to which he tops it with a fillet of salmon teriyaki accompanied with a syrup of elderflower, honey and beetroot. Several types of aged smoked sausages, apples, cakes, cooked pears, meatloaves, Ghanaian fufu with peanut soup and palm soup, sweet bread, jugged hares, Chinese fried pork balls, several types of wild honey with the comb, dragon fruits, baklava, star fruits, a rainbow variety of lokum, Turkish delight, mozzetta, Austrian cheese and bacon spätzle, fresh carrot and coconut juice, and they're fizzy. He thinks excited as he reads the labels and tries them. Some come with fine drawings on how to eat each dish. Yun, the sampling king. He wolfs down the deliciously displayed delicacies in front of him as if a hole existed in his stomach and is directly tapped into his soul. He grabs forward to pour himself another cup of fizzy carrot juice. Who knew carrot juice could be that good? He smiles as he picks the wide, tall and heavy metal jug to do the deed. After a considerable amount of time learning the world through his hands and mouth, he falls to his back, stuffed more than a hastily prepared full-fat heavy turkey made ready and special, including gravy for Thanksgivings, and ponders with a bloated gut absolutely nothing as he burps and gasps for breath, accompanied by his rather unexpected, uninvited, and sour-tasting trumpeting from his rear. This solo feast that is fit for an emperor has led to his oncoming, space-cramming food coma. "By God!" remarks Yun loudly, as yet another uncontrolled flurry of beeping and bapping make acquaintances with the air he so desperately is trying to let reach his lungs cleanly. Swine! Schwein! My God, I can't breathe," he says, disgusted with his own aerated produce. Some steaming minutes later, and several trumpets of backlogged gas, he rolls to the side, rubs his belly, and makes a more unannounced jazz. Something like 40 minutes must have passed, and he finally brings himself to lift off the ground and look around. To his surprise, Yun sees something else that sticks out as odd. Past the table on the other side of the platform in the desert stands a single wide door hinged to nothing but air. It's like someone undone the hinges and collapsed the fake wall, leaving just the door to stand alone. Man! There is no wall, no lintel, no room behind it. Just a wide door, the desert, and the unmissable grand statement in the sky. The moon. Strange. First I didn't see this giant table, now I didn't see this weird door. By now, Yun would have to visit the little boy's closet, but no such urge makes itself present. His eyes transfix at the door, as if it could suddenly disappear if he was to look away, and in another sense he feels drawn to it. His legs nearly seem to walk on their own. As unremarkable the door appears to be, the situation around it begs for a closer investigation. The door itself is old and wooden, dark brown and simply ornamented. He approaches it carefully, returning to his more cautious and inquisitive nature. He stands in front of it now. It's a bit taller than a normal door, thinks Yun. Wait. He peers around it and confirms his most recent thought. He is able to directly look behind the door. The sandy landscape does simply continue on. So it's not just an optical illusion with mirrors or something like that, confirms Yun. But this confirmation stacks yet another brick in the sack of thoughts labeled, "This is not a dream." He feels less and less confident that he could just wake up and for this all to just be his brain's way of turning him back to being a sweet 7-year-old boy having a good night's dream. I mean, this would be the right spot to wake up. Come on, man. A feast in the desert? Wake up. Yun pinches himself hard and steps on his own toes. The pain calls home but leaves him where he is. He takes a few seconds to gather himself. So what's the point? How did I get here? He sighs and looks back at the feast, the stone columns, the beautiful night desertscape, and the very fact that there is something normal here, a door, but even that had to be strange in some way. There's no need to try the desert. I can see miles in every direction and some of those sandpits look horrifically deep. Yun makes a sudden turn and just decides to open the wide door like a Chad and walk straight through it. The door immediately blows open unexpectedly with Yun's hand cemented onto its handle, and it swings him directly into the sudden darkness. The proof of free. And immediately after, a flurry of colors appear as stretched lines whirling about furiously, and the door slams into an object that instantly halts the flow. Yun's hand loses grip and he's sent twisting across the ground. He lies there still, his hand palpitating. Minutes pass while he remains in the same position. His stomach is turning, his fingertips are prickling. His nails feel cold. Yun's eyes are pressed close together, but he feels as if the space around him is still moving wildly. The feeling of vertigo won't let him go. A dust of stars flicker under his closed eyelids. His heart is not beating in the right way. It seems to be racing ahead of him like an out-of-control horse, pulling Yun along, hoof knows where. Yun's pulsating hand makes no faint resolution in attempting to listen to his commands. It knows, as well as Yun, the situation is out of their hands. He moans and rolls from his side and onto his back. He uses his other hand to massage the one hand affected. His teeth come together in response to the pain. The swirl on him does not let up, no matter how hard he tries to focus. The world keeps turning, always turning. Perhaps this is how it should be, because the world is turning, always turning around its own axis. Yun is starting to think, he's starting to feel, he's starting to start. And there it is already, the familiar sound of heaving and splashing and the emptying of buckets full of the now wasted, undigested good food from minutes ago. Great, thinks Yun. Just marvelous. A few more heaves and gulps, and him trying to keep it down and failing later. He finally is feeling better. He stays down, waiting for things to gradually get back in sync, not wanting to jinx it. Eventually Yun's head turns towards the door he came from, and his eyes move wide open. He sees the door plus a wall, the same door that had none, and stood alone on a giant moonlit platform with the desert as its background. The door has fully swung the other way and has sunken into the wall, as if it had melted into it, literally melted. It seems as if the edges were made out of metal and got welded into the solid stone wall, a feat that would normally require an incredibly intense heat output, like those stemming from welding activities, but it is a wooden door, and the expected black char markings are completely missing. Yun's head moves around quickly, taking in the new information presented to his eyes in disbelief. This makes no sense. How's any of this? He is in a room, ceiling, floor, and walls. Yun notices that his shoulder hurts as well. He turns onto the other side and away from the vomit, clutching his hurting arm, resting his head against the stone floor. I don't know what this is, but I'm still not awake in my own bed, he thinks somber. Man, I didn't see anything after turning that damn knob. Man, my hand, still can't feel much. It's throbbing so hard. He thinks concerned while he moves his head away from his hand to see the rest of the room. His stomach twists, and for a different reason this time. This will never end. What is this now? In front of him, a good few meters away, is a raised rectangular platform made out of what it seems to be one solid piece of blue metal. On it hover 3 objects on their own individual pedestals. He feels compelled to walk towards them, so he does, picking himself up with energy he shouldn't have so soon. With moaning and gritted teeth, he rises from the surprisingly warm stone ground and walks on to see this wonder he won't fail to meet. As he gets closer, the objects begin to glow, and out of nowhere, 3 more pedestals appear just ahead of him, to which he goes first. Wow, what's going on? Yun observes the unique symbols and engravings on each of those pedestals. He has never seen them before, nor could he guess where or from when they historically originated. Each of the 3 pedestals in front of him have one book laying on top of them. Yun's feet seem to move on their own, approaching the situation without hesitation. The books seem leather-bound, thick, coarse, and aged. Each are purple in color. He opens the one in the middle, but the yellowed pages reveal nothing to him but blanks, unwritten words. Are books not supposed to be filled with words, preferably written out ones in ink? The quality of the papers seem unusually dense, and have what seems to be a coating applied to them that give off the feel of water resistance. Strange, thinks Yun before closing it, approaching the next book on the pedestal on the right. Nothing, no words, not even a title. He quickly moves to the book on the far left and confirms the same result. His legs move past the row of pedestals to what catches the interest of his eyes first, which is the object in the middle, a dark orb. It is large, about the size of a 25-inch TV screen. It hovers over a uniquely designed pedestal made out of a silver-looking solid metal, positioned taller than those carrying the wordless books. Its surface is oddly translucent, and whatever it is made of, Yoon can't decide if it is liquid or solid by its rather peculiar appearance. But whatever it holds or is being held by is black. Wrapped around the upper area of the dark orb is a thick white metal band that has woven into it several words of varying sizes and lengths, appearing in transitioning colors of green, blue, and red, each separated by a dot but continuing on like a chain. The smaller words are on one chain. The larger words are on separate lines. The smaller chains move many times faster than the larger lines, which seem to shift at the speed of a thick drop of hanging glue. Even stranger than all of this is the living, snow-white owl that quietly stands on the orb and tilts its head as Yoon comes closer. To the right of the orb, on another uniquely designed pedestal made of a silver metal, is a bluish-white diamond in the impossible shape of a thick arm's-length spear. Within it spins slowly a large gold coin. Following the circular path on the coin's circumference are etched in minuscule symbols. On one side of the coin there is the head of a wolf, on the other the body of a raven. The strange part to this is that Yoon can hear the wolf and the raven take their turn inaudibly howling and cawing. To the far left stands vertically a large tombstone made out of red and gold marble. On its surface swim hundreds of tiny moving arms of the same marbling in live motion. Strangely more, out of the tombstone stretches forward one life-sized arm, and unlike the others swimming on the surface of the tombstone, it in itself is still and is made out of a glossy-appearing, purely white marble stone. On it appear in quantity an endless stream of words that slickly move on its surface, emerging from and fading back into its white marble stone exterior. Yoon stands there for a moment, pondering. Moving mini fingers, a coin that makes animal noises, and an owl. An owl! It's about the only normal thing in here, says Yoon out aloud and astonished. Something tells him he will regret expressing these words verbally. Yoon's thoughts move backwards, backtracking to the very point things became strange. The bloody staircase, thinks Yoon in wonderment. He is not willing to entertain the idea that this might not be a dream. What happened to Ange and Dex? What if the logical explanation is worse? What if all three of us are still in the staircase and fell unconscious due to an old gas leak that no one else was there to report? All three of us could still be lying on the steps in the pitch dark, slowly losing our lives. He lifts his hands and rubs his temple. By God, thinks Yoon somber, a word he picked up from his dad when he watched incidents on the true crime series. So what is this? If I'm basically dead already, fainting in the staircase, then this all will be over soon. But if it's not, Yoon snaps out of it. I'm here on my own and things are crazy. No need to bring up more things to pepper my situation and get me freaked. Frankly, the gas in the staircase situation would be really bad, he says to himself, trying to self-reassure, but the shortness of his breath betrays his attempt. Well, I'm here. Let's see what this is all about. And he moves to the figure in the middle. The white owl tilts its head the other way and flaps his wings a few times as if in preparation to take off. Yoon takes a few careful more steps, walking slower as to not send the owl off. He thinks he observes something moving in the orb. His focus diverts from the owl towards it, and he walks on closer. Yoon's skin begins to lose temperature, and his steps feel longer to complete. Time seems to take a bend, and the room around him gradually fades in color. He can see his breath rising from between his lips, but he senses something else leaving him as well. He can't quite explain it, but it feels as if something extra that he can't visually detect is probing around for him. The closer he gets, Yoon's feet feel even more compelled to walk towards the orb. He looks up again at the owl. Its large eyes are fixated at his. He is not quite sure why, but he seems to sense a mocking emanating from the feathered creature. Now he feels as if more than one thing is circling him from head to toe, but he sees nothing around that will cause this feeling. The 12-year-old boy's attention slowly shifts away from the owl and fixates towards the orb again, as if it is letting him. The pressures on the sole of his feet as he walks on closer seem to disappear, as if he is no longer walking on solid ground. The blood vessels in his skin gradually feel colder, dispersing the heat in his body inexplicably quick. The owl makes a sound that forces Yoon's head to tilt up and look. It presents him with a horrible visual scene. It has no head, and a large, black, gaping hole is in place of its torso, as if it has been violently pried open. From its open neck flow out long black strings, and they form leaf-like appendages, very much like the stretching seaweed of the oceans, but slimmer overall, carefully climbing up, spreading in a circular pattern. The movements suddenly halt, and they begin to flail fast. The air around the owl visibly weighs, as if a great fire was on the ground between it and Yoon. The picture in front of him is dividing and twisting off into several circular directions, as if someone took round cookie dough cutters of escalating sizes and applied them onto the view in front of him. The circular cutouts warp and move in clockwise and anti-clockwise directions at several varying speeds. It's as if Yoon is looking down a madness-inducing tube of crazy machinations of moving images in a new type of kaleidoscope. Without warning, Yoon's teeth begin to heat up fast. Ah! 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 He screams viscerally as his gums bleed out in reaction to the sudden change of his now very thermally conductive teeth. Ah! Ah! Over his own screams, he hears a sharp hiss, and Yoon finds himself, without warning, standing in front of the right pedestal, the row of the empty books he just walked past. Wait, what happened? Why am I all of a sudden just standing here? Thinks Yoon, bamboozled in a partially sleep-induced state. He rubs and swipes along his gums and teeth with his index finger. No blood. No damages. His legs just simply start to walk as if he was a train on invisible rails, and they take him to the silver pedestal ahead and to the right, the diamond spear. Yoon looks to the left as he approaches the spear, back at the owl. Its eyes are there, staring at him like nothing happened. Yoon stands before it, wide-eyed as if he just woke up from a fever-pitched dream, the diamond spear. A bluish-white mist escapes from it, and in moments covers everything else other than it and Yoon. A slow vibration comes his way. He takes a few steps back as the airwave makes contact with him. A slow vibration comes his way. He takes a few steps back as the airwave makes contact with him. His fingers begin to move, and it feels as if various strings in his mind are being individually tested, like on a harp. A large wooden instrument shaped like a curved D, which has strings vertically fixed onto it and is plucked. The strings in his mind are being flexed. 2 strings, then 3 are played in a timely rhythm in groups and pairs. Beautiful as the melodic flexing may be, as the reverberating musical sounds pass from one hole of his mind to the other, Yoon finds this type of the working play of his mind taxing to his concentration and energies. He can sense that the one plucking the strings is nowhere near done with their desired range of complexities. A graceful wind of tunes washes over him, whirling and touching every bone his body provides and angles of them creating their own unique sounds that Yun for some reason can hear also. He feels himself spinning and his feet make small leaps, bumping him up and down, and it looks as if he is dancing and hopping around like a ballerina and a rabbit in one form and sound, further straining his senses as the melody not only picks up in pace, but seems to play a whole other tune that complements the one being played. Yun's body moves and spins faster, faster than he is comfortable with. He hops higher and higher and lands harder each time. These sensations turn to pain as his feet, knees and back feel the strain. Teeth smile from nowhere particular, and Yun senses if this goes on, soon there will be no pain. He opens his eyes and finds himself next to the pedestal with the empty book on the far left. He blinks a few times. What? He feels ill and violated. The beauty presented by the melody and eventually melodies had a bitter and sinister core. Yun feels he was lucky that it stopped. Shaken by this experience, he carries out a check on himself and just like before, he finds no physical damage left on him, apart from vertigo and weak-feeling knees. He uses the pedestal to keep himself upright. A couple of minutes pass before the unstabilized sensations his ears and feet are experiencing lose their spin and balance out. But as soon as Yun found his equilibrium, his legs motion forwards and carry him straight ahead to the towering figure on the far left, the tombstone. With the outstretched white marble stone arm and what he just witnessed, he is not at all optimistic and rather dreads what a harrowing experience a tombstone could have in eternal store. Yun connects the dots and tries to actively deviate from his forward-motioning path, but to his disbelief, even when he really tries, he is wholly incapable of changing his direction even in the slightest. The myriads of minuscule moving hands on the surface of the tombstone rise and fall frantically, as if they know and are expecting Yun's arrival, and the endlessly forming ink-black words covering the white marble stone arm appear and disappear like shadows on the surface of a blue ocean, where large fish rise from below and approach its surface briefly and disappear back into its salty depths. It seems the words and the fonts appear frenzied like the ever-going work of an obsessed tattoo artist practicing passionately on throwaway paper. But on Yun's approach, the shadowy black prints begin to slow and get even darker and stop moving entirely. His quivering lips want to say something, but the stiffening fear described on his face says it all. As he walks on, his throat perfectly lands into the clutches of this marble stone hand, and to Yun's terror, it physically closes neatly around Yun's desperately croaking throat and neck. His Adam's apple feels uncomfortably squeezed. Goosebumps sprout all over his skin. His guts squirm like a worm put on fire, and something tells him this is just the beginning. And to his dismay, his intuition proves true, as his eyes witness the words moving from the arm towards the hand and onto Yun's neck, face, and then his entire skin surface. The words morph and change fonts as if they are looking for a particular flavor to describe them. Yun's hands fly up and grab the stone hand, trying to pry it open. The hand further tightens his grip, and the situation is turning into a solid and persistent choke. His face is a nightmare of fear and ever-changing lines of ink-black letters no living tongue now is capable of speaking. The words are searching through his soul, looking for an answer, a key to the transcendent code existing in all matter. Yun feels a pressure point building on his forehead. His vision narrows, and a gust of wind and sand circles him. Despite this, he begins to shift into a rhythm, an untapped frequency he can intuitively focus on, a pressure point. A calm washes over him and he feels weightless. The pressure point builds up and stacks like a fire being started in the woodlands. A way to stop a campfire from spreading uncontrollably is to surround it with small stones and sand or dirt, and taking away anything the fire could latch onto beyond its intended space. In the same way, Yun mentally surrounds the pressure point with his will. Interestingly, instead of trying to smother the point, Yun seems to fan the flames, concentrating its strength, boosting it on top of containing it within an area. His concentration solidifies more and more, and at the same time he increases the pressure point on his forehead to another level. With Yun's eyes closed in intense focus and concentration, he notices not how the minuscule endless swarm of unnerving hands have escaped the tombstone, leaving it completely, and are traveling through the pearl-white stone arm and towards his neck. They begin to latch themselves onto Yun. They enter and merge into his skin. He is awash with them. They've flown into every square millimeter his skin has to offer, and yet he notices none of this newest development. Yun slowly becomes intensely aware of his individual fibers of muscle, electrical paths, and blood flow. He feels his heart beating in a new rhythm, and he intuitively siphons some of the energy from the pressure point towards his heart. At this moment, a voice in his mind speaks deeply and independently from him.
Excellent.
The surrounding gust of sand comes in much closer, flowing over and around Yun, caressing him. The tombstone suddenly breaks and crumbles into large, uneven, jagged blocks. Then they just fall away, releasing an extraordinary, wild, and expansive desert storm. The winds are great. Their sounds howl a moment of crisis. It's as if many types of beasts are being forcefully rounded up and are in the process of being captured, but not yet willing to concede defeat. The supermassive volume of whirling sand converge and collapse onto Yun. The sand swirls around him, creating several thick rings of ascending sizes. In all of this, his shoulders, thighs, face, his entire body, despite the proximity, stays untouched by the sand. The sand moves from his right shoulder down to his right arm and gathers at his fingertips, snaking its way through like a giant boa. There the sand turns into a small whirlpool while the storm around him continues bellowing. The storm that arose from a gust escaping a tombstone blows wildly and loudly from every direction. The sand collides and grinds with and into each other, marbling off into different spectrums of sand: gold, red, white, and black. Thick lines swirl up and around Yun, competing with the space in the air. The ground under him disappears, and his clothes blow back and forth into many directions. Yun floats into the air, and the pressures it exhibits on him won't let his screams fill it with despair. A hefty pain shoots up his right arm. He finally opens his eyes and turns his head and looks on, horrified. The stone arm holding onto his throat has gone, and in the stead he looks on in sheer disbelief as the whirling pool of sand at his fingertips that has given way to a massive swirling black hole. The storm all around him rebels in a god-awful pang that nearly collapses Yun's eardrums. A terrible pain moves up his fingers, then his right arm begins to turn black. Tears flow down Yun's face, and he screams. His heart beats in his mouth, and his arm progressively becomes the deepest black Yun has ever seen. Meanwhile, a change in the black hole's condition forces the storm to begin collapsing into it. Large flows of thick sand get minimized in size as they are sucked in, while Yun remains where he is, hovering and screaming in the air. The pain reaches his elbow, and his heart is heavy from the stress. His legs dangle beneath him as he loses the energy to hold them straight. Then the whirl of sand closes around the black hole and moves on closer to spin around Yun's fingers. moving up his arm, covering it with hot golden sand. In agony, Yun loses consciousness.